Hi, I am pumped to be spending some time with you today. If this is the first time we are meeting, my name is Magda and I prepare soldiers for STANAG exam. And in today's video, I'll be answering questions that you guys asked me on my Instagram. So without further ado, let's get straight into that. The first question, it's not related to the STANAG exam, but I've decided to include it here because quite a few people asked me this, like in formulating the question differently. But I thought that you're asking me this because you're interested in what's my teaching background. So I have the master degree in bilingual education and in teaching English. So I'm a qualified teacher and I studied in Poland and in Italy. And then I worked as an English teacher in Poland, in Italy, in Kyrgyzstan, and currently I'm working in Spain. And I started teaching military English back in 2018. Yeah, I think at the beginning of 2018. And it was purely by chance because the academy where I worked at that time collaborated with the military base that was nearby. And I was asked to teach a course preparing for the STANAG exam. And in March 2020, I was laid off because of the pandemic, and I started working on my own, teaching online classes. So right now, I work remotely, and I have students from all over the world, which is truly amazing. Sometimes I have a day when I have classes with students from 4 different countries. And that's what I love the most about it, this variety and the possibility of working people who are in so many parts of the world. It's a really enriching experience. I think that that's enough about this question, because you're probably interested in some specifics, some tricks related to the STANAG exam. So I'm going to jump directly into that because the next question is related to the reading tasks and the reading part of the exam, which often turns out to be quite challenging, especially if we're talking about the level 3. And I think that's because we kind of take it for granted. We think, yeah, I can read in English. This is the one that we usually are exposed to quite a lot. So we don't give it enough attention. And sometimes we neglect it. Like we focus so much on improving our productive skills or our listening that reading is usually like the last one that students care to work on. So yes, I've got some tricks what to do to improve your score in this part of the exam. And I think they might be quite unusual tips that you might not be expecting. So I prepared this one in a form of a slide because I wanted you to see all of it to be sure that you got it. So let's take a look at it. Okay, number 1 is to be aware of exam trap words. So exam trap words are those words that change the meaning of a sentence. This one is particularly present like on level 2 when you have to like just one word in a sentence can completely change the meaning of it and for example is not true anymore just because of this one word. And some examples of those words, by the way, I made a whole post about those words on Instagram and I included 12 words. Here you have some examples of that. Unlikely, roughly, nearly, and barely. So I encourage you to take a look at this post because you can see like an extended list of those words that I created analyzing the exams. And this one is particularly useful for students who are preparing for the level 2. But it wouldn't harm to take a look at it if you're preparing for the level 3 as well. Number 2, this one is for students who are preparing for the level 3. Learn synonymous expressions. So, for example, the expressions that you can see on the screen are the expressions that mean to be surprised. But the level 3 requires higher level of vocabulary than just simply surprised. We have an expression that means that in a move that has raised environmentalists' eyebrows. To raise the eyebrow, right? Like we raise the eyebrow usually when we are surprised. And the other one is a phrasal verb that has taken the environmentalists aback. This one is a typical phrasal verb that tends to appear in the level 3 texts. Then number 3, and coming back to number 2, there'll be a lot of examples of that, and I encourage you to take notes when you notice them, when you're preparing for this part. And it's gonna serve you in the future when you create like a bank of those expressions and you come back to them. So not just synonyms, but like synonymous expressions. Like for the level 3, that's what's going to help you much more than just words that are synonyms, because those expressions were taken from the level 3 text. One of them appeared in the text and the other one appeared in one of the answers in the multiple choice question. So that's my tip. Collect those expressions. And number 3 is to pay attention to prefixes. This can save you a lot in the exam if you come across a word that you don't know, a verb that you don't know, because it seems to be an advanced verb. For example, the verb to outnumber, to overestimate, or to downplay. So just by looking at the prefix, we can kind of figure out the meaning of the verb. It doesn't always work because not all of the words with this prefix would mean that, but most of the verbs would. So the prefix out usually means to go beyond. So the word outnumber means that there are like more people, like it goes beyond the other number. So for example, the Spanish army outnumbers the Portuguese army. It means that there are more people in the Spanish army than in the Portuguese army. Then we have other kind of prefixes like over, down, under as well. So pay attention to those because they can really help you to figure out the meaning of the verb when you come across a new verb. So these are my 3 tips in terms of reading. Okay, here I decided to take a screenshot of a question. Basically, the question starts somewhere in the middle. I'm afraid the day of the exam, I can't find words to express myself, I suppose. So I'm asking for advice to prevent that. So I chose this question because very often, I'm asked this question, what to do to avoid getting stuck? What to do to avoid having this kind of blank, like your mind going blank? The thing is that you cannot really avoid it. You can be really well prepared and it can still happen to you, whether you are an intermediate student or an advanced student. It can happen, like it happens to all of us and it will happen. So my tip is to get used to it, to get used to feeling uncomfortable and to apply strategies when it happens. So it's not about avoiding those situations. It's about how we deal with them and what we do about it. Does it make you totally collapse and freak out? Or you're able to show the examiners that you know how to get out of this situation? So my recommendation would be, if you get stuck, use some expressions that native speakers use when they get stuck. or when they kind of get lost in their own argumentation. I also made a reel about it on Instagram. And yeah, it's called like this: what to say when you get stuck. So some expressions like, I've lost my train of thought. Where was I? Okay, so they are very natural and native speakers use them all the time. Do you think that native speakers don't get stuck when they speak English? Of course they do. So it sounds very natural, like when you say it. And it it's nothing bad, really. Like, you have to show the examiners that you know what the native speakers say when they get stuck. You say the same thing and you get back on track. Okay, and you keep going. So that's my tip. Get used to this feeling because it will keep happening. Okay. And learn some strategies how to deal with it, what to say. If you're missing a word, try to decide, okay, so I'm going to describe the word. It may be effective in some situations, but sometimes it's going to take you too much time. Like if you're taking the exam and you're missing a word, if you start to describe this word, this may not be really effective. You might take too long to do that. You may, if this word has a synonym, just like use a different word. Don't be so perfectionist that I remember I knew this fancy word and now I can't remember it. So I will just keep like hoping that it will get back to me. No, like don't waste time. Say a simple word that comes up and don't torture yourself. The other thing that you can do is to describe the function. If it's an object, the function of this object. Yeah, I would go for that. In the one, this is not the exam tip, but in the informal context, when I don't know the word, I call it a thingy. And yeah, referring to an object as a thingy, not in the exam situation, but in the informal context, may also be a lifesaver. Yeah, so I think this is my answer to this question. Okay, this one is about practicing speaking. So I'm going to read a part of this story. 1 year ago, in the pre-pandemic era, I used to go to some language exchanges, travel abroad, and other common things that now I do not really know how to focus on. Probably there are some websites where people want to spend their time talking, speaking a foreign language, but truly I'm kind of lost in this area. Yes, there are spaces online for people who are looking for speaking partners. I follow a lot of teachers that have their own speaking clubs. I have also opened groups, international groups for students who want to practice their speaking skills with soldiers from other countries. It's not like a huge speaking club, but they are like lessons in small groups. There is a fantastic learning community created by Hadar Shemesh, and it's called the Influency Community. I'm going to leave you the link below in the description of the video, so you can take a look at it. This one is fantastic. And I know that also Stephanie, the English coach, she's got like twice a year, she's having an English challenge and she's creating some kind of small communities of learners from different countries. And then later on, those people become friends and they keep meeting to chat. Even when the program is over, they keep maintaining those friendships. And yeah, they make it a ritual. A lot of those speaking clubs are free ones. They are people like you who are looking for someone to practice their speaking with. So, like, the only difference is that you don't have a teacher to give you feedback there. Some of those groups, like some of the paid ones, have teachers' feedback, but not all of them. So you gotta search for it because there are places like that online. And there are more and more of those. I think during the pandemic times, like we all felt a little bit lonely and we are looking for opportunities to connect with other people. What do you think about learning some specific sentences that could be used in many different kinds of essays, articles, and so on? Could it improve your writing, or instead, is it better to write for each test? Would you consider the best specifically at this moment? All right. So it makes sense to learn some opening sentences for every type of writing. Uh, this one is especially important if you're like writing an informal letter, to remember that there needs to be some kind of friendly greeting at the beginning, like, sorry, I haven't written for ages, but I've been so busy, and this kind of opening sentences. So it makes sense to learn this kind of sentences and use them to and always use them in your writing. Or the opening sentences of a report. The aim of this report is to outline, and so on and so forth. So this makes sense. Also, like learning some expressions that we use, like some linking words, but like don't memorize like some sentences and like try to force them in your texts. A lot of them will just sound very artificial or simply forced there. And the examiners will see through that, especially if you use some fancy expressions and the general level of your writing is not that good. If you make some simple grammar mistakes, if the text is not coherent, these are the things that you should really focus on, and not so much about like memorizing some sentences. Practice them. And I think by practicing, you will just simply like naturally learn some opening and ending sentences for your letters. You'll kind of develop this style. I'm also not sure what kind of sentence the person who asked the question meant. Maybe it's what I'm talking about, like opening, ending sentences for each type of writing. It always makes sense to learn those. But remember that it's like fancy expressions should be a cherry on the cake. And if your writing is great in general, and then you add some fancy expressions, that's awesome. And it's gonna look very natural in your text. But if your grammar is kind of broken, then you apply some fancy words, it's not gonna help you much. And you will still lose points for those things. So I think it's better to address those issues rather than trying to memorize some sentences. Okay. What is the difference between STANAG level 3 and 4? Then a question is also asked in Polish for those of you who are like, huh? Yes. So I have also prepared a slide about this one because there are quite a few things that I wanted to mention. And I wanted to make sure that I don't forget those. So level 4, these are mostly people who have daily contact with the language. They usually work in the English speaking environment. And English is just, they live in English. Like the work is a big part of our life. So they communicate in English, and they are able to achieve this level of competence by simply being immersed in the language. And some tasks, especially the ones that are in the Polish exam, they really reflect the real life situations. As far as I remember, there is a presentation to make. So this is something that people do on a daily basis in the work context. There are reports to write with some data analysis, very typical. And even in the listening task, you're supposed to take notes. So that's also something that really reflects the real life situation when someone is doing a briefing and we have to take notes while this person is briefing us. So this level is mostly reserved for, and mostly the people who are able to reach it are those who are fully immersed in the language. And if you're planning to go for it, like you really need to create yourself those opportunities. And I'm going to talk about it later on because one of the questions is related to that. But let me compare some aspects of the level 3 and 4. So the level 4 is about HOTS. HOTS are higher order thinking skills. So this is the level 4 checks if you're able to analyze information, if you are able to follow some deduction and reasoning, basically how you process information, how you think in English, and how you analyze this information, the information given. In terms of specific skills, speaking. So the person who is aiming at level 4 is expected to have almost native-like fluency. It doesn't mean that you have to speak like a native. Okay? It means that you're speaking, the way you express yourself, it seems effortless. And this person also easily adapts to different contexts, whether it's a very formal context or a very informal, like colleagues having a beer slang context, right? And so this person is able like to juggle like really easily between those contexts and the language that they use. Writing. Here I'm going to refer like to, because level 4 is different in different countries. And in Polish exam has a certain structure, while the Spanish exam has a different structure. The Spanish exam is not that different from the level 3, while in Poland the level 4 is quite different in some aspects. In Spain, the level 4 writing requires you to write an article for a military journal. That's like the most typical task. And it kind of requires some global perspective, also with some analysis. And the Polish one also requires the analysis, but it's typically a report analyzing different type of data. Like both like the numbers, the pie charts, and opinions, as far as I remember how the task is constructed. Reading and listening. So the difference between level 3 and 4 is that level 3 is about reading between the lines, and level 4 is about reading and listening beyond the lines. So it's all about the metalinguistics, the tone of voice, the attitude that the person has, the connotations. So all of this added dimension of the language, when the things are not expressed directly, interpreting the information, cultural references, jokes, allusions, puns, language puns, humor, metaphors, all of this kind of messages that native speakers use a lot and they get it. So the level 4 checks if you also get this kind of metalinguistic aspects. So the next question, as far as I remember, is about preparing for the level 4. Let me show you the question. Yeah, here it comes. What tips do you have for someone who wants to achieve the level 4? So my tip is to try to expose yourself to authentic materials as much as possible. All kind of authentic materials, both the ones that are very formal, so different videos from the conferences, and very informal ones, and different types of slang from different countries. basically everything that is very authentic. Let me come back to the previous slide for a second. Humor. This is also very country specific, context specific. Language puns, cultural references, they will be also different depending on the country. So watching TV series, like coming from those cultures, seeing what makes people laugh, watching some comedy stand-ups, this would also help to understand the humor, because this varies a lot between the countries. So consuming a lot of authentic content, both like in the form of listening and reading a lot of type of texts that are similar to the ones that you're supposed to write. So in Spain, there will be a lot of articles for the military journals. In Poland, a lot of reports with the data analysis. Sorry, sometimes I'm mixing up British and American pronunciation. I wanted to stick to American one, data. And yeah, trying to fully immerse yourself in the language and understanding what exactly the tasks are testing, and trying to give the examiners what they want to see. Let them tick off all of the boxes that they want to tick. If we talk about writing, exam level 3, what about using a text from description of the task? Is it forbidden? I would recommend paraphrasing it instead. So you're not going to be punished for doing that, but why would you do that? Paraphrase that, like use like all of these words that you're going to use. You want to impress the examiners, and just by repeating the words from the task, you're not impressing them. So paraphrase. Okay, this one is not a question, it's a tip from one of the guys who, and you have to use the suitable conditional in accordance with the situation. Maybe good topic. So there is this kind of myth that in Spain, that in order to get the level 3, you need to use the third conditional. Okay, this is like an urban legend that everyone repeats. So it's not like this, like you don't have to use the third conditional in order to get the level 3. It's just like a simplifying the idea that you're expected to use more advanced structures. And the third conditional is one of those structures that is used in order to hypothesize about the past, which is one of the tasks that you have approaching the level 3. So on one hand, yes, like this is a really good structure to know and to use. But the fact that if you don't use it, like you can still pass the exam, okay? But it's gonna come in handy, definitely. So if you feel that you haven't really got like the conditionals, that's definitely like the aspect of grammar to address, same as passive. Passive, inversion, conditionals, these are some advanced grammar structures that you can use in order to impress the examiners. Any last minute exam tips? So for those of you who haven't seen my first webinar, actually my first webinar has this title, like STANAG last minute tips, 10 last minute tips or something like this. So you can watch this video. It's me talking for 45 minutes about some last minute tips. But I thought that I would approach this question differently. So to talk about what to do the day before exam. So like it's kind of like a last minute tip as well, like just what to do the day before. So I'll tell you what you should not do. You should not start learning any new words the day before. This is not a moment to learn new words. This is the moment to revise some of the materials that you have studied so far. And also don't start like doing like a lot of listening, reading like the day before. Like I guess like that you have worked like for many months like to prepare for this exam. Remember that every task that you do, every exam task that you do, every time you listen to something, like you're working on having a better result in your exam. Every time you use a word that was your passive vocabulary, but you work on moving it to your active vocabulary, you're contributing to the good result in the exam. So the day before, focus on self-care, well-being, and mostly like some physiological needs, like have a proper sleep. This is so important. Like don't study until late night hours and then like don't go tired to the exam. You know that there is quite a big chance that you'll fail the exam if you didn't sleep the night before. But there's quite a low chance that the words that you have studied the night or the day before would appear in the exam. So always prioritize your rest. Okay, it's going to do you a favor, like if you're there completely rested, relaxed. So focus on yourself, your well-being, ways of relieving stress, whatever works for you, whether it's doing sport or listening to music or meditating, you know it better. So do these kind of things. Do not start trying to learn as much as possible the day before. It's not the moment for that. It's the moment to relax. Just wanted to send you this message. I think it's a good one to answer the last question, because this one was our last question in this Q&A session. If you still have some more questions, this is where you can find me. You can find me on Instagram and on Facebook, although I'm planning to leave Facebook soon. I don't think it's my platform. And here, you can also ask me questions in the comments of this video. If there is anything else that you would like to know and you would like me to address, you can contact me whether directly in the DM on Instagram or here in the comment on YouTube. So thank you for being here. And I'll see you probably next month. I'm trying to record one webinar per month. So I hope you'll be here with me next month as well. Take care, stay safe, and see you in my next video.